Hey, it's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another tutorial. Today I want to talk about setting up your own email server. This is something that's always been pretty complex and complicated, even for those people who really know what they're doing. It's a little bit of a pain. So I found this really great open source project called Mail in a Box. It's been around for a few years. It's got active development. And the way that they've set this up, they've made it so super simple to get your own mail server up and running. So if you've wanted to have your own email accounts, maybe you have a group who you want to have email accounts, like I do the Lubbock Linux users group, and we wanted to have our own email accounts. If you want to just offload that capability and offload that responsibility, that's great. If you've got the money to do that, that's awesome. That makes the economy work, right? But at the same time, maybe you just want to host it yourself to have a little bit more control over it. So what Mail in a Box does is it gives you that capability, and it makes it very simple to get everything set up with some pretty nice scripts to install everything that you need. So first I want to say, they have a tutorial video right here that is very good. If you'd prefer to go over and watch their tutorial video, I absolutely suggest doing that. I hope that mine will add a little bit to what they give you, but they do have a really great starting tutorial video as well. As you go down the page, you can kind of see some of the things that you get out of the box with this. It's really pretty great. You can just kind of scroll down and see for yourself everything that they offer. I'm going to go ahead and scroll back up here. And then up here at the very top right is the setup guide. So if you go over to the setup guide, it kind of gives you the pre-flight checklist, some of the things that you're going to need before you start going through the setup process and running the script. So they do have the video guide. They link back to that on their main page. But you need a domain name. You need to be able to set up certain records in DNS. So your box has a name. You have to be able to give the actual mail server a name. If you're running specific servers off of the mail server that you're setting up, you'll have to be able to set up your mail server to run as a DNS server as well. And again, this guide walks you through all of those steps. It's really, really great guide. It's a really great video. It explains everything you need to do. Now, they use Gandhi.net for their hosting, for their domain names. I'm going to use Hover in this case. So I want you to see that there are differences in the way that you do things, but you have to be able to do each of these things regardless of who you use for hosting. So I'm just going to kind of scroll through all of this stuff, right? Your domain name configuration is important, and setting up these domain name server names. Your glue records and setting up the box itself. So they've got some information here that you go through. And really you just kind of go through this step by step and do these things. Some of these things will tell you you can skip it if you don't want to do this, or maybe you need to go back and do this later. So they give you that information as you go along. It's really a straightforward guide, but they make it so super simple to get this done. So we're just going to kind of start at the top, and we'll go through this one piece at a time. So first, our pre-flight checklist is really important. So make sure that you've got this stuff set up and you're ready to go. So they do have some great FAQs right up here at the top. Can I run my mail in a box at home? And their answer is no. And there's a few reasons for that. Maybe you can set up your home server to actually receive information by doing some port forwarding or using a reverse proxy like I've shown in the past, so that you have a domain name that points to your home server. That's all well and good, but most ISPs, that's not all ISPs, but most ISPs these days block people from running their own mail servers. They block the ports that you need in order to do that. So if somebody tries to send you email, you may not receive it. If you try to send email, it may not go out. So it just becomes kind of a pain and a hassle to do that. So that's why they say no. Basically, you might want to try it, but they're not going to support it if you have issues. What does it cost? So they try to give you an estimated cost. So I'm going to run this on DigitalOcean on a $10 droplet. So that's $10 a month. The domain name costs a little bit of money per year. I think it was $14 per year for me on the domain name that I got. So break that down over 12 months and you're talking $1.25. So we're talking about $12 a month, which is what they estimate. So next is, do you have time to do this setup? So they say it takes about an hour to 2 hours. I would guess that that's probably correct. We're going to try to go through it a little bit quicker than that. I'll cut out a lot of the empty space and I'll fast forward through a few things where it's just running scripts and installing things. So it'll go a little bit quicker on the video. They do the same thing on their video. So if you go check out their video guide, it's the same way. They fast forward through some of the stuff that's just sitting and waiting, but you do need to have that time set aside just so you can complete the setup. So this is a really good one to note. How will this affect my website? So I set up my own Fixit Del Rio, my own domain originally with this. So today we're going to do opensourcesawesome.com, but I did my Fixit Del Rio site, which is also a business where I host several different websites. And when I changed the DNS settings for that, what happened was it actually changed all the DNS settings for the entire domain. So a little bit of a problem whenever you can't get to the website you want to get to, but you can now get email. What it turns out is Mail in a Box actually has a place for you to set up the proper domain name forwarding. So you just need to understand that when you do this, if you set it up on an existing site, you may have to go in and reset that up inside of the Mail in a Box system, and we'll go through that. So it says, can I modify my box after I've set up Mail in a Box? And I agree with them. I would say no. This should be running on its own server, just with a subdomain of a domain you want to use. You really shouldn't try to run anything else on the server. It should be your email server, and that's it. All right, we're going to get started with step one, which is the domain name. So they use Gandhi.net, and they talk about that several times throughout here. I use Hover, so we're just going to go over to Hover and opensourcesawesome.com, and I also use DigitalOcean. So I'm going to create a droplet. So that's really the first thing I need. I need to have an IP address to point my subdomain at. So I'm going to create a droplet here. So this is what DigitalOcean calls their virtual servers. So I'm just going to use Ubuntu 18.04. I want to talk about this real quick. If you're not used to Linux and BSD type systems, generally Linux distros and BSD systems will have more frequent releases that are what they call their non-stable releases, I guess. And then they have these releases. So the even number.04 in the Ubuntu world is their long-term service or long-term support release. That's why I use this. This is a system that's going to be supported for up to 5 years, or actually at least 5 years after it's released. Next year in 2020, the 20.04 version will come out, and it will also be a long-term release. So it's even number.04, which indicates April. So in April of 2020, the next long-term support version will come out, and pretty quickly DigitalOcean will have an option to use that as well. But 18.04 is great. That means I've got at least 3 or 4 years left of support for this version, and then I can upgrade my servers when I need to. So I'm going to go down. I'm going to leave it on standard. I'm going to just hit this little left arrow, and I'm going to pick the $10 a month droplet. I don't need block storage, and I'm just going to leave it on New York, but you should pick a location that's geographically close to you. We're going to go on down a little bit further. I'm just going to leave it on using the authentication for SSH keys, and I'm going to pick this one right here. And then we'll go down just a little bit more, and I want to give it the subdomain that I intend to give it. So it's going to be box.opensourceisawesome.com. I use box because that's what they suggest in the actual tutorial, and you'll see that in a minute. So you should always read through an entire tutorial before you run through the tutorial, and that way you kind of have an idea of what you're trying to set up. But I'm just going to do create. And this should generate my site pretty quickly. I'm not installing any kind of one-click applications. It's just going to provision me a Ubuntu 18.04 server. Once that's done, it's going to give me an IP address, and I will copy that and paste it into the Hover side where I'm going to set up that subdomain of box on Hover. And it's done, so we'll copy the IP address. We'll go to Hover, and we're going to go to DNS, and I'm going to say create. I'm going to give this a host name of box, and I'm going to paste in that IP address, and I'll set this to 5 minutes, and it's done. So here we have it right here, box with our IP address. Now I'm going to go back to the instructions page. So they do a great job of breaking down everything that you need to set up inside of your domain name server, and what you need to have, what information you need. So again, this is a really great tutorial. It's just step by step. You just kind of follow it through. So here they talk about cloud service providers. They use DigitalOcean also. So it's a really great system to just run through with them. So if you're not a DigitalOcean subscriber, I'll add a link in the show notes, and you can click on that and you'll get $50 of credit for the first 30 days. So you can actually test this out if you want to on a $10 droplet, and you can set up 5 of them for that amount of money. So that's pretty awesome. So this is a pretty good little tool here. I'm going to open this up, and we're actually going to go see if the IP address that DigitalOcean gave us happens to be on the block list. And if it does, it may be an IP address that you want to get rid of. Yeah, so this IP address is on the block list. That's not good for trying to get a mail server going. So what happened was somebody else set up a mail server and started using it for spamming out email. This causes a problem whenever you want to send email that's legitimate, because now you're on this block list. This one's only on one blacklisted site, so it probably isn't going to hurt anything. I'm going to stay with it. I would suggest, though, if you come up with any on this, you destroy that droplet and try again and see if you get an IP address that isn't blacklisted. Just important to make sure that you've got everything set up so that it works well for you. So firewall settings. We need to make sure that we've got certain firewall settings set up. Right now, my droplet is not running the firewall. I've shown on some previous videos how to set up the firewall. You should do that, and you should make sure these ports are open and allowed. Okay, we're going to skip down to this step, and then we'll go back and set up our DNS servers so that they are running off of our domain. So the first thing we need to do is just highlight this. First thing is they're just telling you to SSH into your droplet, which I've done, and I've run the updates. So let me finish it out here, and we'll reboot it. While we're waiting on that to reboot, we're going to highlight this next command. So this is actually going to go out and grab the script that sets everything up for mail in a box. We're going to go back over here, and I'm going to tell it to SSH back in. We're back in, and I'm going to run this command. If you want to change where the storage everything is at, you can do that with this command here. It's not something I'm going to do. So while we're waiting, this is going to start going and getting everything it needs and setting everything up. So it's really a one-line script to go grab the script and then run the script. So it's going to come up and ask a few little questions here. It's nothing major. You just need to answer the questions that it asks. So it's telling you also that if you ever need to rerun this, you can just run sudo mail in a box. So what do I want my email to be? Pretty straightforward. Hostname is box.opensourceisawesome.com, but if you happen to choose something different from box, then you should change it here. And you just hit tab to get to the OK button, hit OK. And it'll continue with the setup. Alright, we're going to pick our location. So I'm going to go to US. And I'm going to go down to Central, which is where I'm at. You should, of course, pick your own time zone. So what it does now is it's actually setting up some encryption. This can take just a little bit, but it's usually fairly quick. It's definitely an important step. Whenever you run this, you should really watch all of the steps that it's taking to install things. This is the part that really it does for you that makes it really great. It goes out and gets all of these applications that, unless you really know what you're doing, you may not realize you need a bunch of different applications to make a full email system work. So it'll come to a point where it says it's about to set up your email address, and it wants you to put in the password that you want, and that means that basically you're creating the admin account because you're also going to have access to the box's control panel. So you want to give it a strong password. And then it wants you to confirm that password. So it gives you a lot of information right here at the end. Some of it's a little bit quick to read if you're not fast. So it tells you that the mail user has been added. It updates DNS, and Mail in a Box uses Let's Encrypt to provision from the SSL TLS certificates to enable HTTPS connections to your box. So basically they're agreeing you to their user license and agreements. You can read that there. So they save their debug log in case there's issues for Let's Encrypt to the Let's Encrypt.log. And then finally your account credentials have been saved. So basically for CertBot, which is what helps keep Let's Encrypt up to date. So it says Mail in a Box is running, and we can log into the control panel for further instructions at our IP address /admin, but we actually should be able to use our domain name /admin. So we'll go try that here in just a second. It gives you the fingerprint just to make sure that you're logging into the right place as well if you're concerned about security. So we'll bring this up and we'll go to box.fit. No. Open source is awesome.com/admin. We may have to specifically tell it, nope, it jumped over to HTTPS. Now it's telling us we don't have a Let's Encrypt certificate yet, so we have to tell it advance. And here we are. So you log in with your email address. And the password you created. And of course you can tell it to remember you if you'd like to. So something really nice about this system is that it gives you a checklist of things that you kind of need to finish up in order to have your system really up and running and secure. So you can change this. You need to go into your privacy settings and change it so that it can check to make sure you've got the latest version of Mail in a Box. Anything with a check mark means you're good, which is great. Anything with a question mark you should look at. Anything with an X means it's not set up yet. So it sees that we don't have our name server glue records set up yet. So this is going to create a problem, and it's kind of questioning this. So we're going to go back and try to set that up here in a minute now that we have our DNS server up and running. It's also telling us that the SSL certificate is not valid, so we can fix that here in just a minute. And all of this stuff is available through the top settings. I'll save that. So this may change. We changed this in our DNS earlier. We can go back and look at it here. We can come down to DNS. And our public record should show the correct address. We can edit this one and change it as well. Update it. We'll see if that'll help here in a little bit. So we'll go back to our system. So 3 issues with our IP address. So we're going to go hopefully fix those things. So we'll go back over and we're going to set this up with our domain name servers now. Okay, so on Hover we're going to click on Advanced. And here we're going to click on Add a DNS record for our glue record. So this is ns1.box. This is the IP address. And we don't have an IPv6 address. We're going to add one more, ns2. And the IP address. Great. Now we're going to edit our normal DNS. There we go. Now we've got our addresses updated. All of our DNS is set, our glue records are set. We're going to come back and we're just going to refresh. So it'll run our system status checks again. So we haven't set up our DNS SEC record yet. We'll do that here in just a minute. and it's complaining about our TLS set. So first we can go fix that, and we'll go to TLS SSL up here in the top system area. And right here it's got a button that we can click basically to try to get our provisioning from Let's Encrypt. So here we get a nice success message. The certificate was provisioned and installed, so that's great. And we can see down here that we've got our certificates that we need. So if you have your own certificates and you want to install those, you can do that down here. You don't have to use Let's Encrypt, but it's a really nice feature to have, just to be able to click on that button and get it. So go back to our system checks, and that check should now be cleared up. And it is. You can see all of our TLS and SSL stuff has check marks, which is what we want. We still have our DNS SEC that we haven't done yet, and there's one other step that we actually need to do in order to be able to send and receive email properly without getting sent to the spam folder constantly. So we're going to go back to our instruction set, and we're going to go look for the DNS SEC area right here. So setup, so system status and DNS. So DNS SEC is an optional step. So DNS SEC is something important, but the actual mail-in-a-box can't set it up on its own. You have to set it up. But you can't set it up until the box is set up, so it's kind of a weird little loop, so we have to come back and do that. So we'll go back to our box install, and we'll find that section where it talks about DNS SEC not being set up. So it has this key. So there's a section that we need to set up here in Hover. So we'll go back to Advanced, maybe. And here's our DNS SEC area. So the key or the tag, so we need to get that off of our box setup. And here it is right here. We're just going to copy that, and we're going to paste it into Hover. The algorithm, so you want to just copy this out of your setup. It may be different for you. So it's RSA SHA1 INSEC3 SSH SHA1. So we want to go find this on Hover. It's RSA SHA1. It's number 7. Great. That was pretty easy. The next thing it's asking for is the digest algorithm and then the actual digest itself. So our algorithm is 2 SHA256, and the digest itself in this case is here. So I'll copy that, and I'm going to go select number 2 SHA256, and I'm going to paste in the SHA algorithm and save it. Now we've got our DNS SEC record, which is what we want. So we can scroll to the top and we can refresh the page. Everything appears to be good. So that's great. Now, before we fix all of that, the other part I want to talk about is this custom DNS. So I've changed my opensourceisawesome.com DNS to basically say it should point to this website, to this server, to look for DNS. So if I have any other things on opensourceisawesome.com that I want to change, instead of going to Hover from now on, I would go here, and this is where I would set all of those things up. So if I have a different site that I need to set up, like if I want to set up a new subdomain and I wanted to call it mesh.opensourceisawesome.com and give it an IP address, this is where I would come do that now. I won't do that through Hover anymore. This is what's controlling my DNS. So it's very important for you to understand, if you set up a mail server that goes with a domain name that you already own and you make all of these DNS settings changes, if you want to add more subdomains over time, which you might, it's important to know that you need to come here to Mail-in-a-Box to set those up, because this is what's controlling your DNS. This is how, when someone types in mesh.opensourceisawesome.com, the internet knows how to tell it where to send them. They do have APIs for Mail-in-a-Box, so everything in here has an API, so if you want to write your own stuff to hit those APIs, you can. I find the web interface to be perfectly fine, so I don't really do that. But here, so if I wanted to add mesh, and I wanted to say that's an A record, but you can also set up MX records and all kinds of records here. And then you can also set up different things like IP addresses and stuff like that. So once you've set that, you would hit save, and that would send that to that IP address. So you hit OK, and here you can see it. And then, of course, you can delete it if you don't want it anymore, and it's gone. So it's that easy to set up your DNS. Just remember that you have to go here to do that. So you do have contacts and calendar. So whenever you open this, it'll actually take you to NextCloud, which I did a previous video on. And you use the same login for this as you do for your new mail-in-a-box server. And this is really where you would store your contacts, calendar information, and that will sync up with your mail-in-a-box system. So here we have contacts, here we have calendar, here you have the gallery and the normal setup. Now the one thing you don't see here is the apps. So this isn't exactly a full NextCloud install. It's a little disappointing to me that they hide all of that, because it'd be really great to set this up as a complete full NextCloud install, but it will do syncing. It will let you put files, it will let you put different things into the NextCloud setup, but it doesn't give you the access to the apps area like you saw with my other video. And I'm not sure if it's not setting you up as a full admin of the system or what's going on. But yeah, I mean, just be aware. It isn't a complete setup the way you'd expect. So we'll just go back here. Once you've set up Mail-in-a-Box as well, you can go in and use these settings to set up any kind of email clients that you want that are outside of Mail-in-a-Box. They also have links that you can click on from within your iOS or Android devices to set those up to check your email. If you want mail, we can actually go look here, and you just get rid of admin and you type mail, and it will take you to the mail login. It's the same login information is used to log into the admin portal for you. Anyone else you set up will use the information that they set up to do that. Roundcube isn't bad. It's not my favorite interface, but it's adequate. So if I open up a different email client, so we'll go to box.fixitdelrio.com and we'll go to mail. And we'll write a new email here. And Brian at opensourceisawesome.com. And let's see if I set this up right. That sounds like a good title. And we'll send it. Now if everything's working, it'll come in here. I may have a couple of other entries that I need to set up though. And here we go. We've got the email that I just sent to myself. So everything's up and running. It takes a little bit of time sometimes for things to get up and running right at first, just because DNS is still updating. Really, DNS updates pretty quickly, but you always want to give it about 48 hours to really get set up and going. All right, finally, this is an important page. So external DNS, you want to click on it, and then you want to pay attention. So if you're running your own DNS, if you're not using the DNS setup that they provided here, then you really want to make sure that you've got a lot of these entries set. So it tells you the A record you need to have set is this IP address, which you would already have if you got to this page. Next is an MX record. So you want to have this MX record. This is a mail exchange record, and you would need to set that up in your DNS. So again, if you go to Hover and you click on DNS, basically when you say add this, you would change this from A to MX and then put in the information that they provide so that you have the correct information for what it's trying to do here. So they really give you all of that here in the setup. So continuing down, there's another A record and then another MX record, and Then you have these things called TXT records, and they represent different things. So depending on your provider and how much text they'll accept for these TXT records, you probably want to set up a few of these. And then the SPF records, I mean, there's just the serve records, the SRV records. There's a lot of things here that you need to set up. That's another reason that I really suggest just doing the setup to use Mail in a Box as your DNS server, and then controlling your DNS for that domain from Mail in a Box. So again, that's where you would go to Custom DNS. That's where you use this. Everything else is already set up for you, so you don't have to go set up all those records in order to be able to send and receive mail. There are a few things there that you may still have to do. Google's kind of particular about how it handles email from these servers. Again, give it some time to propagate and see if you're still getting sent to spam at the end. But you may have to tell people, hey, if you're on Google, whitelist me. Again, I highly recommend just letting the script run and then setting up the DNS records the way that they say. So it's very step by step, but you do have to kind of skip a section and come back to do some of it. Knowing how to set it up in each type of system. So if you're using Gandhi.net versus Hover.com versus GoDaddy, they're all going to have different ways of setting up the DNS. So you may have to kind of do a little bit of Googling on your own to figure out how to do that in each one of those. But the steps are there. It's just that you have to go through them one by one. And it really doesn't take that long. Honestly, the longest part is just waiting for the scripts to run. I kind of put it in fast forward as you went through the system there. It probably took all of 8 minutes to run everything and get it all installed on DigitalOcean. So it really isn't a bad way to set things up. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. If you have questions, if you have comments, let me know. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you got something out of it, just like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.